Buongiorno a tutti, benvenuti alla terza sessione e ultima sessione del workshop Istantanee, l'improvvisazione collettiva in Europa 1960-1980, organizzato dall'Istituto per la Musica della Fondazione Giorgio Cini. Anche oggi questa sessione avverrà in lingua inglese. Quindi ripeto quello che ho detto anche all'inizio delle sessioni precedenti, tutti possono intervenire anche da YouTube mandando dei messaggi in italiano e in inglese e poi cercheremo di appunto di amalgamare. Welcome to everybody to the third and final session of Istantanee, Collective Improvisation in Europe, 1960-1980. In the first session 2 days ago, perspectives were presented on the origin and history of European improvisation ensembles, with special accents on London, Amsterdam, Berlin, and Rome. And the focus of the second session was methods of analysis and transcription, aesthetic concepts and terminology. Now, in the center of this session, we'll find the three protagonists of musical improvisation in Europe, John Heinemann, Evan Parker, and Giancarlo Schiaffini. Ingrid Pustianaz and Veniero Rizzardi will share this session. The musicians will give demonstrations on specific techniques and attitudes, and will discuss with us different aspects of improvisation. So let me ask Ingrid or Veniero to begin with the session.
Ingrid, yeah, maybe you should turn on mic.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Go.
Well, I understand that yesterday we had more or less cut short some questions that were raised, especially on terminology. But I remember there was something, someone from, I think it was Enrico Milani, who through YouTube had posed some interesting questions. So maybe we can take them and introduce them today, right, Ingrid?
Yeah, but so the idea is maybe just to remember one theoretical question before leaving the floor to our musicians, and which was the question of idioms, and the other questions. The other question would move the discourse in many other directions. So the idea is if we can, take the coda, yesterday coda, and start with just some reflection on this idea of idiom, because Evan, Giancarlo, and John, just started to answer, and then we can present our today's session. So please, Evan, or Giancarlo, and John.
Evan, you should turn on. Please, Evan.
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you.
So that I went running to the dictionary immediately afterwards because I was concerned that perhaps I'd misused the word idiomatic in describing Derek Bailey's playing, or saying that to the contrary, to describe it as non-idiomatic was ridiculous. But perhaps I should have gone on to make it immediately clear that while I consider Derek's solo music to be totally idiomatic, and in that sense recognizable, immediately recognizable. I also acknowledge that he became very interested and committed to the notion of non-idiomatic collective improvisation. So the practical consequence of that was that he was looking more and more for people to play with people that he'd never played with before, and to bring people from very diverse backgrounds together in order to ensure this non-idiomatic quality, which he certainly achieved with the later company's recordings are, for me, almost unlistenable, I must say, but they certainly are non-idiomatic. So I hope that clarifies the point that I was trying to make, Laurent.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. That's I'm sure that this question would emerge today, also after playing, because when you will do some music, then this question will be very obvious. Okay, would John or Giancarlo add something?
Okay, I can continue what I was saying yesterday. Is it clear? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that is. I think that non-idiomatic is a false concept, because every idiom. I went to the dictionary as well, and I saw that every dictionary gives a different nuance in the interpretation of idiom, idiomatic, and so. For me, and that's my opinion, that the idiom is just a kind of a low-level language. So when you have language, you can understand the words, understand the language. So an example, if there is somebody speaking in German and then send the message in German, if the one who's listening speaks German, he understands everything. If the one who speaks German, but the listener is not, doesn't know German, he can not understand the message, but he can get the idiom. He can recognize that his partner is speaking in German because of the vowel, the consonants, the accent, all that. And in this case, he recognized the idiom. So going to music, I think that if we think to the, I don't know, Louis Armstrong, the hot fives of Louis Armstrong, they have an idiom, which the idiom of New Orleans music and so on. If you go to listen to Charlie Parker, we recognize the idiom of bebop, as well as the nuova consonanza and so on. If you put together people who never played together, they generate a new idiom. Because if they play again and you listen more, you can recognize them. So even if you put together, say, Johann Sebastian Bach, Arnold Schoenberg, and Rosenrad, they will generate I don't know what, but for sure it will be a particular idiom, a personal idiom of that group. And so to say non-idiomatic, I think is a nonsense.
Yeah, thank you,
That's all.
Giancarlo. It's a very interesting position. And Veniero?
Yes, no, it's we have opened a can of worms here, but I think that to stay on the most objective ground that I can, that to further complicate things, there is we quickly will quickly leave this apart, but in music speak. Especially when talking about instrumental technique, usually we say idiomatic when for example, in written music, you write something which fits the characteristic, the mechanic and the technique of a specific instrument. If for example, if I write a piece of experimental music, let's say, but I respect the ordinary, the normal, the regular technique of the clarinet or the violin, I'm writing in an idiomatic way. Otherwise, if I call for extended techniques, of course, I don't use idiomatic technique. This is one thing that maybe should be clarified. When coming to free improvisation, it's become commonplace to say non-idiomatic improvisation, just to differentiate from established idioms, just jazz or bebop or whatever. But of course, the term is not, as Giancarlo said, I think it's no more viable because of so many years of free improvisation that has established somehow as not as an idiom, but as a subgenre of improvised music. So it's very hard for me to use these terms idiom. Yesterday, Laurent has proposed a difference between idiomatic and idiosyncratic, which can be maybe more exact in my terms. Anyway, I think that I would hear someone else about this topic, but I believe that we can get easily stuck in this problem.
Vincenzo, please, yeah. You have to turn on your mic.
Okay. The issue of idiomatic reminds me to the 70s, when I was studying with Umberto Eco at the University of Bologna. Eco posed the problem of idioms in art and devised the notion of idiolect, that is, the rule of a single speaker, of a group current idiolet, or a period. He called idioms hyper-encoded chains. Now the problem is the level of discretization of the code units. This can be a knot level, and then we have musical grammars, syntaxes, or a bit level, and we have the parts and metrorhythmic devices. As you know, Baroni, Dal Monte, and Giacoboni elaborated in 2003 a generative grammar and implemented it in a computer program called Leugri. The supposedly produces piece in the style of Lagrange to assess whether grammar can capture stylistic features that are relevant for stylistic categorization is another problem. But as educational music theory demonstrates, the unit of hyper-encoded chains can also reside on a suprasegmental level. And here we have the components of timbre, the Hendrix or Charlie Parler sound, or of sensory motor energy, the swing, the groove, or the touch of the musician, or the way of being in time in Royenne style, or in Elvin Jones idioms, or in the rest of the Young styles behind the beat, or in Eric Dolphy style ahead of the beat. Every parameter of stylistic arrangement can generate idioms, but also the search for non-idiomatic. This is the 0 degree of idioms, which generates precisely the idiom of the search of a non-idiomatic. The idiom of the search of a non-idiomatic. And today, we recognize the Nuova Consonanza idioms. The lesson is that there is no such thing as zero stylism and non-idiomatic. John Cage was right. As Adorno said, everything can become material for a new form. Another aspect of the question is why, if there is no escape, then avoid the idiomatic. The search for non-idiomatic is not a position that's derived from modernity. In this absolute search for the new, why not think of an ars combinatory of idioms instead of making it the image of aesthetic failure in improvisation?
Yeah, thank you, Vincenzo. It's a very interesting position. And as we have a very rich schedule today, I would say if there is somebody that want add something to this topic in a short comment, that it would be welcome. Otherwise, yeah, John, please, of course.
Just quickly, it's really over my head, this whole discussion. I feel like a dumb musician, really, but because you guys are so erudite, that's great, and it's beautiful. I just wanted to say one thing. When I first met Franco Evangelisti, can you hear me all right? Yeah. When I first met Franco Evangelisti, I showed him some scores and he was talking to me and he kept saying to me, Oppenstein, Oppenstein, and I was saying, gee, I don't know Oppenstein. I finally figured out he was saying open style. That was it. Thanks.
Okay.
There is David Bernstein too, and Valentina. No, David, you have to turn on your mic, otherwise. Okay. Yeah. Again, you was too quick. Okay.
I'm good now.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'd like to bring up the music of Musica Electronica Viva with respect to this question. I know them quite well. Alvin Kern was my colleague for many years, and I know Frederick as well. And their music, not only I'm not thinking of the earlier works like Spacecraft and stuff like that, but the later music is has all styles, all idioms. I'm sure everybody knows this. Alvin Kern with his keyboards and all of the samples that he has at his fingertips. Frederick can bring in every kind of music from Johnny Comes Marching Home to Beethoven. And then you, of course, have all the electronic sounds that they can produce. And their music actually is a exploration of multiple idioms, which is really fascinating. I just thought I would bring that up.
Yes, that was more or less what I was saying yesterday when talking about inclusiveness. I mean, the specific idiom of Musica Elettronica Viva is its inclusiveness. That's, of course, and jazz comes into the picture, of course. That's why I think that the old question of generalizing idiomatic or non-idiomatic in relation to free improvisation is really dangerous for me.
Valentina?
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's very interesting what you all said, and also what Vincenzo Caporaletti said about the 1970s, because it's more of a issue of history of musicology rather than that history of improvisation, I think. The fact that we received idiomatic from the late 1970s, early 1980s, when there was a switch from continental European musicology to Anglophone musicology later on. And then we received the idiomatic, non-idiomatic thing, whereas before it was not that central as a vocabulary. I did a quick search through Google on how much the word comes up over time, and it certainly comes up much later. And I would just like to stress that in the 60s, the idiomatic, non-idiomatic kind of discourse was not existent outside of the UK and England in particular, like the issue of the vocabulary was around different vocabularies in continental Europe and different vocabulary in North America. So it's really like, and like even about spontaneous, for example, like I'm pretty sure that if you, and please Giancarlo and John, correct me if I'm wrong, like spontaneous linked to improvisation said to Franco Evangelisti, for example, it would not agree with that term. So like there is like a set of, but instead like spontaneous was an important word in California from what I read. So it just like there are a geographical construct during the 60s and the 70s around words, and then they collapsed together into certain clusters of words more in the late 1970s and early 1980s. This is my perception, if that's useful at all.
Well, I think that Valentina is right. I mean, I think putting in perspective the history of terms and how they are used and when, in which context, of course. It's hard to piece together everything, especially when we're dealing with history and musicians coming from different backgrounds, and also in this context, I think. Well, I think that we should, if we are finished with this, of course we're not finished, but let's pretend we are finished with this question. I would like to introduce a little bit the structure of the meeting of today. We have thought of 3 sessions, roughly. The first session, we would have a presentation of personal experiences and memories and recordings and materials, whatever. And we'll ask John, Evan, and Giancarlo to do so. And then in the second session, the first session will last more or less 1 hour, and then in the second session we'll have improvisations. That will be the actual musical session, structured with leaders or proposers. Musicians that would propose ideas such as schemes, content, time, number of participants, other parameters for improvisation. So we'll have Giancarlo Schiaffini, who will introduce the practice of schemes for and structures for improvisation, and Evan, who would talk and introduce the practice in the free improvisation context, and finally John, who will introduce the practice within time frames. This is more or less, and then we leave the last hour, or what will be left, for question and answers, where we can incorporate some questions that were left without answers in the past sessions. So I would ask Valentina to introduce the musicians that were selected for taking part of the workshop, but somehow they were not included in the practical session of today.
Yeah, I suppose you're saying Ingrid, not Valentina. Yeah,
I said Valentina, sorry.
Yeah, don't worry. Yeah, I was just wondering, what now? Yeah, so I would like to remember everybody, even if there is no need to remember everybody, that we are not in Venice, and that today there should have a wonderful workshop with 12 students. And these 12 students are today present with us. And I would like just to mention all of them, because they're working for a year and now another year. They have to wait to meet our musicians. So that are Agnese Amico, Nina Baietta, Beatrice Arrigoni, Davide Barbini, Alipio Neto, Michele Bondesan, Francesca Scigliuzzo, Giulio Gianni, Alberto Colodel, Francesca Naibo, Luciana Ianiello, and Giacomo Salis. So I would say really thank you to participate to our workshop. Thank you to being here, and thank you for waiting with us for the next year meeting live. For today, for question of technological settings and other aspects, rehearsals and meetings, the 3 students that will participate actively with Giancarlo, John and Evan are Francesca Scigliuzzo, Michele Bondesan and Giulio Gianni. So it's my pleasure to leave the floor to John Heinemann for the first presentation.
Thank you. I would need to share the screen. If you could make me a co-host. I have.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, it should be done in a minute.
Okay, so I prepared a kind of short video to kind of give an idea of what my early background was and influences, and just an idea about what was so important to me in early musical experiences. Do I have the possibility to?
Yeah, just a second, because Tommaso and Serena don't answer. La condivisione è già attivata. I don't see it. He's not. Yeah. Let's try.
That's it.
You can share your screen without being co-host. Just go ahead.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So, here you are. So, there's also, because I know it's not so easy to understand always the English, some people have more difficulty than others. I have transcribed the what I'm saying in a file, which I'll try to post. Okay, so this maybe I need to close this. Okay. Okay, so here we go.
Are you the police?
No, ma'am. We're musicians.
106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
I first heard a trumpet player play it probably in a high C when I was 6 years old. My mother had taken me to Radio City Music Hall, famous place in Manhattan, a theater in Manhattan. And anyway, I loved the trumpet. I didn't get a chance to start studying until I was 15. But when I did, I found a trumpet player teacher that was great and turned out to be a game changer for me and fantastic influence in a positive way. Eli had lost a leg in the war, in the Second World War at Anzio, and so he was a tremendous influence. He would bring records and would listen to Charlie Parker and Jerry Mulligan and Chet Baker, and he would bring Bartok and Stravinsky. And I actually went to see Charlie Parker because there was a festival in White Plains, New York. One summer, the summer after I began playing, and I knew who he was. He played two numbers. There's tremendous excitement to go to something like that, but a greater experience was going to Birdland, sitting in the gallery for non-drinkers and seeing Clifford Brown up close, looking down 20 feet away. Complete tremendous experience, and they actually recorded that live at Birdland. So it was something that I could treasure, those memories. I still can see his face playing once in a while. Probably the strongest and most powerful experience I had was seeing Coltrane at the Five Spot with Thelonious Monk. The Five Spot was a little bar, almost small club in the Bowery of New York, Lower East Side. This is Coltrane now. That was a period where Coltrane was playing those sheets of sound. This was about 1958. And it just totally blew my mind. I have never gotten over it, really. Incredible experience. To put things into a larger perspective, I was born in 1939, ages ago, of course. 1939, the beginning of the Second World War. Eli lost his leg in Anzio. His parents had a little chair in the back of the shop, and they thought, this is where my son will end up, in this chair. Instead, Eli went to Juilliard, got a degree in trumpet in Columbia, connected to composition. He became a pacifist after the war. He was active against McCarthyism. He is well known for a piece called Last Letters from Stalingrad. And some of the Jewish community criticized him for this, saying, what are you doing? These are Germans. We're the ones who got. And Eli had this consciousness that these kids were out there, these people that are soldiers, human beings. Okay. Sorry about some of the confusion on the screen. I hope you were able to hear that, all right? Yes?
Yes.
Well, those were enormous experiences for me. And I have a couple of clips I'd like to play, something to do with the group, coming from the German documentary that was made at that first concert at Modern Art Museum. So I'll go back to sharing a moment. So that was Ivan Vandor, who passed last year. Ivan was he was fun-loving, great musician, and great sense of humor. That was an example where there was a little bit more virtuosity, which is unusual for the improvisation group. But Ivan's contact as his material was so interesting, rich, that it sort of was a kind of exception to some extent. I'd just like to play another clip, if I may. Again with Ivan. So that Give My Regards to Broadway was this kind of interruption. We're talking about idiomatic, and that you're in that atmosphere and everybody's tense and they've got the cameras, and then we have that display. Very, very talented person, Ivan. Ingrid, what's the time frame? Should I stop? Should I go on?
Oh, if you want, you have other 5 minutes because you were. How do you prefer? How do you feel?
Okay,
But
sure.
if you have something to add,
I wanted to say,
please.
talk something about. There's 2 years ago, young man in my youngest daughter is a musician, lives in Missoula, Montana. Very good violinist and actor, and Rachel Petit, here's her name. She introduced me to this DJ, this young man who has got a tremendously interesting voice. It sounds like the DJs of the 70s. And he was he was great in that he did a program on Mario when Mario Bertoncini was in a hospice, and he was dying, but I had sent him material, and he did this program on Mario, which is very beautiful. And Mario knew about the fact that there was going to be this program, and I think he heard some of it. We're not quite sure if he did, if he was conscious at that moment or whatever. And that I was very grateful to this young man. But he, let me just put a slide up. Second. No. Sorry, I should have had this out. Okay. Excuse me. All right, so this is his name, Billy Kautz, and he has a college radio show in Missoula, Montana. But it's somebody to check out, especially for the younger or the musicologists that are interested, because Billy does this program every week, and it's always about improvisation and new people coming up and new groups. And I mean, of course, he's done things on the major groups that are around the States. But so I just it's very interesting because it's just a small radio station, but I believe he's really up on, and he also there's a number of his programs that are can be found on if you look it up, look his name up. So he interviewed me and 2 years ago, and I was very grateful what he had done for Mario, and it was an interesting experience for me to have that interview. He Sorry. I'll just play for you one. Okay, this is it was purely composer player. He's asked me about at the beginning. Group. There were a number of people that were in the group. You know, almost out of nervousness, probably. Let's get more people to start this group out.
Sure.
And Austin played on the first concert with us, and then the selection of people settled down to being six composers, performers, and that's the period that I was there for, you know, from 65 to the end of 70, that period. And it was, you know, I was really very lucky. I was a nobody, you know, essentially. And I just was, you know, in the right place at the right time. And the other composers more established, and, you know, there were also the film composer Ennio Morricone, you know, was there, and it was just a unequal, you know, it was, a lot of people said to me, "Oh, you were in the Morricone's band," you know, but it wasn't like that. It was an experience that was, you know, 6 equal individuals.
How did you determine that? Did you know, sometimes for some of these improvisation sessions or creation sessions, you lay these ground rules, you know, did you all as a group before you even started?
Well, I mean, I think that the thing is, we were on the same page in the sense that it was atonal, going towards atonal, not serial exactly, but the influence of that, arrhythmic, you know, it was, and you have to be sort of on the same page to be able to do that. Otherwise,
sure.
Otherwise, you know, someone's coming out with a melody or something like that.
Yeah.
So we weren't saying you can't play an octave, but it was implied that we're not going to play a melody, a melodic line so much, you know. So that, and there was
emphasis on rhythm.
A lot of rhythm, a lot of timbre. You know, there was an emphasis on sound quality of the instrument, and you can hear it in that piece that I mentioned.
Is that the trio piece?
The trio piece.
Yes, I'd like to play that.
Yeah, because that's short enough to get an idea. And that was I was playing trombone, and there's Ennio Morricone on trumpet and Walter Branchi playing contrabass.
Yeah, why don't we get that queued up here?
Okay.
This is
Ancora un trio. That's right, Ancora un trio. Yeah. Yet another trio.
Here we go.
Okay. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Thank you,
I
John.
would just, just to before introducing Evan, just to ask if you can, if you can repeat the name of the DJ, because I didn't understand it.
Yes. I'll I'll send in the chat. I'll send in.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay, that's
he's somebody to very interesting guy. Yeah. Yeah.
great.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you, John. Well, now is the moment to give the floor to Evan. And please, if you open your mic. And, do you hear me?
Very stupid. It's taken me a long time to learn that. Excuse me.
Your mic is open now.
Buried down in the bottom of the screen.
That's true.
Yeah, I did make some notes, but I'm not sure how appropriate it is to work from the notes. I can quickly talk through. I mean, I start with a concert of Coltrane and Dolphy in 1961, where we heard in Walthamstow. So I was 17, I think, at that point, and I was already a big Coltrane fan, and I didn't know so much about Eric Dolphy at that point, but it's interesting how these names keep cropping up, you know. These were very important people for many of us, not necessarily wanting to play like them, although my earliest efforts were exactly to do that. But then there came a realization that you cannot be John Coltrane. He's already alive. He was still alive at that point. He's still doing a very good job of being John Coltrane. We don't need anybody else to attempt the impossible thing of being another John Coltrane. So the realization came to me when I was still living in Birmingham. I was asked to make some music for a student film from a friend of a friend at the Royal College of Art in the film school there. And it was a science fiction film. For years, I told people it was based on Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit, whatever it's called, but it wasn't. It was general futurism, a general idea of the future, and not necessarily a utopian view, but not an absolutely dystopian view either. It was cleverly done in a way. Featured. I saw the film again fairly recently, and it features a woman watching television and changing the channel with a remote control. All of that stuff was entirely unknown at that point. But now it looks commonplace to see somebody changing the channel with a remote control. Okay, so different things would crop up, and there was no clear narrative. It was a kind of collage of interesting clips. And the idea was, okay, play futuristic music. So the group that I was playing with at that time was a rhythm section with bass piano and drums. So absolutely trying to be the Coltrane Quartet. And the piano player said, I've got no idea what futuristic music will be. I can't be part of this. And the drummer said, no, it doesn't mean anything to me. But the bass player was interested. And the two of us made some stuff, not really knowing what we were doing. But the let's say the score we were playing was play futuristic music. And it fitted the film. Okay, the student was, his name was Gavin Owen. He was very happy to use that music, or some fragments of the music that we did. And that must have sown a seed for me already. How come these ideas came to you as futuristic music in the moment? How surely this is the most interesting way to proceed, to carry on with the idea of playing futuristic music. Now it segues very neatly in a story, which maybe the story is too neat to be true, but it's actually, this part of his, I can swear, is gospel truth, that the colleague of, there was they call it the diploma show at the end of the year at the Royal College of Art and in London. And I was invited to be there, and we saw the film. And then afterwards, Alfreda Benj, who was a student and a colleague at that time, she's known now, I think people will know her as the wife of Robert Wyatt. But back then she was in the film school at the Royal College of Art, and she introduced me to John Stevens. She knew John Stevens because she worked in the bar at Ronnie Scott's to earn money as a student. And John Stevens was often at the bar in Ronnie Scott's. And so John Stevens, just to put it in context, John Stevens was in effect, the leader, the leading spirit of the spontaneous music ensemble. And that introduction was tremendously important to me. John was very open to meeting me and understanding what my interests, what I knew. And a very important moment was when I mentioned the name Milford Graves, the recently late Milford Graves. We were talking about drummers and the directions of new drumming. And when I mentioned Milford Graves, I could see John immediately said, okay, I'm starting a club. Why don't you come down and we'll play? And to begin with, I wasn't a member of the Spontaneous Music Ensemble, but fairly quickly I became a member of the Spontaneous Music Ensemble. And that's in my small world, the legendary Little Theatre Club. I think Derek Bailey talks about it in his book. And this was really the meeting point for all the people that were interested in what's coming next. Let's not even give it a name. Let's just say what's coming next. And a lot of it was influenced by what had already happened, of course. What comes next is always about a succession. You're taking up the torch, moving on. How can we move this on from what we know, from the work of all these heroes? And for some people, Anton Webern was a hero, and for other people, Eric Dolphy was a hero, and so on. But bringing all these strands together inside the Spontaneous Music Ensemble, it worked for a bit, but then it seemed that John's idea, and he was more and more the leader of the group, his idea was to make it a duo just with me. And that's when we started to play completely what we called at the time open playing. No, there were no prearranged elements at all. It was, except, of course, the prearranged elements of our two sensibilities. So every time you try to make a verbal definition, there's always a way of somebody saying, that's not an accurate verbal account, because there were pre-arrangements. There was a saxophone there. There was a drum set there. These, as soon as you bring a saxophone and a drum set together, you're in a situation which is not unconnected with the past. But nevertheless, you can be optimistic and hope that there's something you can add to the history of saxophone and drums, say, in this case. And I think there was something that could add. Now, in asking me to stay with the duo, he effectively gave the sack to Derek Bailey. Give the sack, is that, do you understand? He discharged from the band Derek Bailey, Barry Guy, Paul Rutherford, who immediately formed a group of their own, which was the original Iskra 1903. So this kind of fragmentation and animosities and friendships and recombinations that carried on for the rest of that early period. And at a certain point, John got irritated with me for going to play with Brotzmann in Germany and not being available. And so then I was given the sack, in effect. But then Derek Bailey and I formed a trio with Jamie Muir, the drummer that later went on to play with King Crimson. Briefly, a brief episode with King Crimson. And then quickly, that trio became a quartet with Hugh Davis, who had just come back from being a student with Stockhausen. And that became the core of Music Improvisation Company. That was added to later by a singer called Christine Jeffrey, or a voice user. I don't know whether you call a singer or... Okay, so in retrospect, now talking about the history of those times, I see at the same time in the Little Theatre Club was the first place where I heard AMM. It wasn't the precise lineup that we think of these days as AMM, but it certainly was the first version of AMM that I heard was playing what I would call AMM music. And the second generation of spontaneous music ensemble was also playing spontaneous music ensemble music. Music Improvisation Company, and I gave terms to these. What I called the SME way atomistic and the AMM way laminar, because there was much more short-term time interactions in the atomistic, and much slower and sometimes imperceptible interactions beyond the sheer simultaneity in AMM. But both of those languages, as we could call them, or idioms, using the very loose way we use the word idiom in English, from those two idioms was forged a new idiom, which incorporated elements from both those approaches. And that carried on. The main change, of course, was Hugh Davis brought live electronics into the mix. And from then on, the early days of live electronics had a lot in common with the examples that we've heard so far from other people. I was really very interested in the David Bernstein's pieces from David Tudor, and from Deep Listening, I always forget.
Pauline Oliveros.
Pauline Oliveros, amazing, two very fantastic finds. I certainly wasn't aware of that really early side of Pauline Oliveros's work. Listening to the David Tudor, I think David Bernstein said it was Variations 4. I'm not sure, but when I did some research this morning and found that the score for Variations 4 doesn't really specify anything about how the music should sound. And so in effect, when you listen to what David Tudor is doing there, and the thing I mentioned yesterday, the music for the spoken story piece called Indeterminacy. I think it's very hard to think that David Tudor is not in effect improvising. And, this whole, there's a sort of background story about what is the best way in a given cultural context of describing what you do in order to present it effectively or to make it approachable by a certain pre-existing funding mechanism or a pre-existing audience or pre-existing promotional mechanism. There's a lot more in common between all of these strands that we've discussed than sometimes the definitions that have emerged or the categories of thinking that have emerged don't reflect enough. I also was thinking about Austin Sieben Tagen and the Stockhausen piece where, or at least the original Deutsche Grammophon recordings, I think that's only part of the complete works described as Austin Sieben Tagen, but they featured a trombonist who wishes to remain anonymous. And of course, everybody knows that was Winko Globokar, but it was presumably for reasons of, let's say, hierarchy. I also noticed that the John Cage record of Variations 4 says with David Tudor or something like that in smaller letters. So the semiotics of the way all of this is presented is very interesting. I'm guilty of the same kind of things myself. And furthermore, I should talk about where musicologists, because this is supposed to be also an interaction with musicologists, where musicologists may be sometimes misled is by the publishing details, which are sometimes pieces which are completely collectively improvised are assigned to one particular individual. This is usually about convenience or finance or bureaucratic, for bureaucratic reasons. So don't be misled. If your ears are telling you this is actually a collective improvisation, that's probably what it is, even if it's called a memory vision by Evan Parker for an ensemble of 12 or something. Yes, in a way, it's my piece because I invited all those guys. I put them together, but I chose them for their abilities to generate musical ideas without me telling them what to do. And you could say, well, that's also a talent. That's also has an aspect of compositional talent. I would consider it more good luck to have met so many great players who are able to make sense of very intermittent opportunities to play together. And that's also something that you might, as musicologists, want to look at and make allowances for by comparison with institutionally funded orchestras and chamber groups who are able to rehearse and practice together and to have regular performance venues often. So was going to be another part of my talk. I don't know if I've gone on long enough now, or you want me to keep going, or maybe a question would help.
Well, you poured in tons of very interesting questions, and we could go on for hours. I would just like to know, since when you narrated the very beginnings of your invention of a new style of improvising, and because of the inspiration from this futuristic imagery, right? Yeah. I think this is very telling because it tells which is really the ignition, the motivation for doing a new music, because you're stimulated by something that should be new, should be an illustration of something unheard, unseen, to come. But just to, I believe that you have a little bit compressed the chronology. I would just like to know when you started doing, when this happened. I mean, the film presentation.
I'm guessing it must have been 64 into 65 because the diploma show was in the summer of 66. So it must have been 65 that we started to think about it.
Yeah.
Or could have been, no, I'm fairly sure it must have been 65, yeah.
And I'm thinking on one thing, since your distinctive idiom on especially on the soprano can be seen as an extreme evolution of the sheets of sound Coltrane idea. Do you remember which style you were playing when thinking of something new you could play on the saxophone? I mean, do you remember?
I was thinking of the history of futuristic music, and a key element for me was the Forbidden Planet, the film Forbidden Planet, and with Lewis and Bibi Barron, who were not allowed to be described as musicians.
Yeah,
because of the Musicians Union said a synthesizer is not a musical instrument.
It was called electronic tonalities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in a way that the crawl, the moment where the capsule gets pushed into the desk and we hear the music of the crawl.
Yes.
They're 20,000 years or two, I forget, 20,000 years ahead of us. And actually the music was made, several months before the film was edited. So the crawl were 20,000 years ahead. But the music the Kroll were playing was made 6 months before the film was put together. So wait a minute, what chronology are we dealing with here?
Yeah.
And the other thing that has occurred to me in the course of the meeting so far, the conference so far, is I'm hearing things for the first time, but I'm not being surprised. Sometimes the dates. The 61 things that David Bernstein played, I think that was a real lesson there.
Sure.
For me, that you didn't know this stuff, but somehow you knew it. So there's a zeitgeist thing that's happening, and the connections, actually the early work in Italy and what was the Japanese group that was doing really good stuff?
Oh, there was the Ongaku?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a zeitgeist. There's a moment, and people said when there was an earlier phase of SME where we were using little instruments, and there's a piece of John's which is structured, pre-structured to a degree, which he called seeing sounds and hearing colors, about synesthesia, and I played a little xylophone, and people said, you're trying to sound like the art ensemble, but none of us knew anything about the art ensemble at all. At that point, the records were very hard to get. I remember the first one that I saw from Chicago was Maurice McIntyre, Kalapurusha, called Levels and Degrees of Light. But it was years before we caught up with or knew what was happening in Chicago. We knew New York, ESP discs and so on, and a certain amount of more Northern European stuff. I knew Last Date of Eric Dolphy. So imagine when I finally met Ham Benning, it was an enormous moment for me. And then Misha, a little while afterwards, because I was going to talk about the way all the connections worked. I've been extraordinarily lucky and in the right place at the right time, and with people generous enough to say he's not quite ready, but come on, give him a chance, kind of thing. And that I would say to the young players, that's the most important thing, is to, as Monk said, don't hit anybody up for a gig. Just be on the scene. So, that's a very wise. I don't know if the people know the Monk's rules that Steve Lacy collected. There's a notebook of Steve's. It's easy to find online. It's called Monk's Rules, Steve Lacy's notebooks or something like that. You find it. There's many different ways it's posted. But that's one of Monk's rules that Steve wrote down. And it still applies. A lot of those rules do. Make the drummer sound good is a wonderful piece of advice, especially when you extrapolate it out to the group and say, make everybody sound good. It's not enough for you to sound good and everybody else to sound bad. That's a horrible mix. If you're in a group situation, you have to make everybody not just make the drummer sound good, but make everybody sound good.
Yeah. And another chronology bit of information that I asked to you is that when John Stevens, when did you meet John Stevens at the Little Theatre Club and you joined the group? Because it was
John, as I said, it was the diploma show in the summer of 1966, and John had already got the club. The basic idea of the club was already up and running. In the sense that he negotiated with the leaseholder to, it was a bar, basically a bar for actors, right in the heart of the West End. And actors like to drink almost as much as musicians, I think. And especially in those days, to drink after a certain time in England was very difficult. So this was a place where that kind of thing went on. And also they would put on little productions there. But after the productions, I think from about 10 o'clock, we could use the place. John had negotiated the use of the place for music performances. And initially was running 7 nights a week. So there was space for everyone. So AMM had a regular night, SME had a regular night. I think maybe Derek had a regular night. It was a very important period because we could all hear one another. And, it was like we were all auditioning for the next group. And it's hard to conjure up the atmosphere, but it was God bless John Stevens. That's all I can say. He died far too young, and he was, in a way, very, very not aggressive is the wrong word, but very controlling character. If you had to stand up to him, but if you did and you knew what you were talking about, then you were okay. He was a stern disciplinarian in a certain sense, but in another sense, completely open, free, and crazy.
One thing that, from our point of view of our days, sounds almost impossible or unnatural, I would say, was the coming together and the permeation, the intersection that happened between what we are now inclined to think of separate musical and social domains, for example, rock. I mean, I understand that one spontaneous music ensemble Carriobin record was done for a major rock label, and that was something, right?
I thought you'd never ask. Where is it?
Okay.
But, well, major label, yes and no, because it was done for Island.
Yeah.
And Island, at that point, in 1968, Island wasn't a major label. They had in waiting in Potentia, Steve Winwood with Traffic, and what's his name? The reggae guy.
Linton Kwesi Johnson?
No. The famous one.
You mean Bob Marley?
Yeah, Bob Marley and the Wailers. So, those were massive hits. And as soon as soon as the money started flowing in from those things, then the boss of Ireland, what's his name? I've forgotten his name. Blackwell, Chris Blackwell. Of course, he had to take care of his principal artists, and there was no time left to talk about, because the original idea was to make a sub-label for improvised music, and he was completely up for that. But it just it's an idea that never happened, you know. So there's one record on a label, on a sub-label called Hexagram originally, and that's Carrie Obin. And to tell the story of Carrie Obin is very interesting, because we made that record at the time when functionally the Spontaneous Music Ensemble was a duo of John Stevens with me, just a duo. So we discussed on the phone, look, this is happening. This record seems to be going ahead. What should we do? And between us, we agreed that it should be more than just a duo. Maybe the duo was too purist and I don't know, austere would be the word. So we threw some names at one another, and of course we had very similar taste. And Derek's name came up, absolutely agreed. Kenny Wheeler's name came up, absolutely agreed, and Dave Holland's name. So no problem. We had a very nice quintet, but that specific quintet never ever played again. Different elements, quartets, but that specific quintet never played again. Of course, Dave went off to play with Miles Davis, and it's very interesting that he hasn't lost touch with the freer side of things. Mm-hmm. And we just did, 2 years ago, we did some recording with Craig Taborn and Ches Smith. Mm-hmm. Dave wanted to do that. It was his idea. And he financed the whole thing. And it's two records of total improvisation with questions about, well, what should we, combinations, you know, duos, trios, and so on. The kind of thing that happens in a studio situation where everything else is open. So that, you know, Dave, fantastic story. The whole thing is just.
Also, Dave, shortly after leaving Miles Davis' group, had, and this is another interesting connection, he made a record for ECM in duo with Derek Bailey.
Yeah.
Which brings up the topic of how ECM Records was strongly advocating free improvisation at the beginnings. Yeah. Well, there are tons of questions to go on. But
one more thing, because this is really interesting. I've spoken about it a little bit, but when we were in the studio at Olympic, the doorbell rang during a piece of on Carrie Obin, and it was Yoko Ono, and she was coming to collect some tapes or some copy tapes from the concert that she'd done for Ornette at the Albert Hall. The most amazing thing that perhaps he's done a lot of amazing things, but Ornette booked the Albert Hall for his second concert in London. He'd already played at the Fairfield Halls, and he wanted to come back. And half of the concert was with Yoko. And this was before the relationship with John Lennon was known about. And Yoko heard some of what we were doing, and she said, this is very interesting. We should get together. And Derek, John, and I did one concert with Yoko Ono. Then the relationship with John Lennon became public, and she also moved on. She had more important things to do. So, I wish we had a recording of that, because she was very interesting, coming from that Fluxus side, which has always been the Brotsman's interest in Fluxus and Namjoon Pike and all of those things. Is when you try and put hard fences around everything, it just doesn't work, because people interact. person to person. And
well, and I would stress the fact to our seminar that so far Evan has talked about the very beginnings of his career within the environment, the growing environment of free improvisation, because all the things that he has narrated are prior to the foundation of Incus Records and the beginning of this own collective but cooperative enterprise, which starts in 1970, if I'm right.
Yes.
And so there is a really long story to be told.
Yeah.
This is a prehistory somehow. But one thing that on the record cover of Topography on the Lungs, Incus #1, there is a collage of words and illustrations, and there is a snippet, a very little thing that happens to be in the back cover, which is a half quote of Frederick Rzepski. This was also, I always been puzzled by this, because this is one of my first records of improvisation.
No, I think I said I wrote a little text I did and just embedded it for people that like to look for puzzles. I sometimes make puzzles on my sleeve covers, record covers. So I wrote the text. It just said Frederick Rzepski talks about improvisation and makes sense. That's the statement. And that was in response to having read about spacecraft, the text for spacecraft.
Okay.
And later on, they came through London on their way to Rome and did a concert in a church off Piccadilly. And I went to that concert. And Frederick was playing that same piece of glass that I think Gianmario was talking about. It was a piece of glass with contact microphones, and he was scraping it. And that made me think about the music that John Cage did for the dance group of they made a concert. There was no dance. It was just the music that he had done, prepared for Merce Cunningham. And there was a piece there which was also from more the Fluxus end of things. I think it must have been the name escapes me. The minimalist composer, very famous now, not Terry Riley.
Steve, right?
Steve, right.
Marian Zazila, I can't remember his name.
Lamont Young.
Lamont Young, exactly. So I think it was an early piece of Lamont Young's for scraped glass. And that was one of the pieces. And the other piece that I came away from the concert thinking I must find out more about this person was Conlon Nankoro, who nobody had heard of in England at that time. But John Cage was the first person to proselytize on Conlon Nankoro's behalf. So very interesting the way it works, the way the threads hook up.
Well, I think that Ingrid, it's 6. I think we should take a break and then resume our conversation with Giancarlo.
Absolutely, but there is there is also one question that maybe for Evan that maybe could shortly answer if the answer is short. From YouTube, Hermes Rosina asked, "What about Morphogenesis group guided by the late Roger Sutherland, and about the duo Furt?"
Well, I can speak more about Furt than I can about morphogenesis, although I think morphogenesis probably comes earlier in the chronological sequence. Furt are wonderful players of sampling keyboards, Richard Barrett and Paul Obermeyer. Richard is perhaps better known in new music world as a composer in his own right. But they've worked together as, I think when they began, one of them played guitar and one played trombone.
That's right.
And they gradually graduated to sampling keyboards logically now, and they have just amazing telepathic relationship when you hear them play. I'm going to talk about them in relation to the record company that I formed after I left Incas, where I was very fortunate to be able to issue some of them first material. But what was the question? I'm sorry, I've forgotten again.
No, it was something,
morphogenesis.
About,
morphogenesis. Well, I didn't really. Our social circles didn't really overlap. I mean, it's hard to explain why. But there was also a band called the People Band, which in some senses came before AMM, or certainly before the phase of spontaneous music ensemble that I've been talking, or that I was involved with. And I can't really talk much about the People Band either, except I know Terry Day, the drummer, and I know Mike Figgis, and went on to be a film director. That's all I know. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I can't really say anything very intelligent about morphogenesis.
Thank you, Evan. Yeah, well, so Veniero, I agree with you. Let's make a short...
To move on. And thank you so much, Evan.
Yeah.
My pleasure. I'm sorry to ramble on.
So great information. And there are more in the can, but we'll find the moment to talk about this. I had prepared something.
Yeah, our schedule is really rich. So let's take a short break, and
we can resume at 6:15, right?
14 to be precise, because we have 10 minutes. No, I'm kidding, of course. 8:15, 6:15. Okay, see you later, everybody. Eccoci qua di nuovo. Vediamo.
So, welcome back.
Yeah. Let's. Here is Giancarlo. Ready?
Ready? Yeah.
Ready. I never left you.
Okay, great.
I was here.
Yeah. Giancarlo, so it's your turn now, and I would very much like to hear you about your. I don't know if you have prepared some autobiographic statements, but of course you are a key figure in this context because of your early experiments in free music with the Gruppo Romano Free Jazz. It was, I understand, it was 1966, 67, and for being part of the second incarnation of Nuova Consonanza, besides many other things. So
yeah, so I can say something.
Can I, Giancarlo? Before starting, could I please ask to Evan, to turn off the mic rather than the camera, because it's more important, because there is a little feedback. Perfect. Thank you, Evan.
Okay.
A te, Giancarlo.
Yes. And no, I didn't prepare anything. I was digging something in my computer, so I can put out something if I can be successful in making my first condivision of screen, because it would be the first time I make such a condivision. Okay, I'll be anyway. I try to be concise, and I was born one morning when the sun didn't shine. It was wartime. And so we had to move away from Rome because they were bombing Rome, and that's of no interest for what concerns us. I went on studying in the ordinary school, and at the time to decide what to do in my life, I was convinced by my family or by not to make a musician, not to become a professional musician. Maybe I was not convinced too, but I went on studying to the university. I graduated in 65 in physics, particularly in biophysics. It was a work on hybridization by RNA and DNA of Bacillus megatherium. So very musical. And then I start working seriously in that sense that my first job was in a transistor factory in Sicily. It was the time that they were switching from transistors to integrated circuits. And so some months there, then I went into a laboratory of the National Committee for Nuclear Energy, which was near Rome, Santa La Casaccia, and I worked as an immunogenetist. They wanted a physicist to work with immunology and immunogenetics, and so for 7-8 years I did that. Okay, that's apart. For what concerns music, of course, I was listening a lot, music records. I can share my roots with Evan Parker. So my roots are on my turntable. And so I started. When I was 15, I asked as a gift a trumpet, started taking some lessons. And it was very funny because I take for a couple hours lessons in trumpet, but I was not so good. And my teacher, which was a very traditional band teacher, told me, "Oh, your lips are too great. You have to switch to trombone because you cannot play with such a." I was thinking, how could Dizzy Gillespie or Louis Armstrong to play with the lips? But okay. I switched to trombone, and I was happy to do it. And so in the mid '60s, so in Rome it was very alive. It was there was a lot of native Italian artists, very good in music, in improvised music and theater. Just to make a name, Carmelo Bene, and that's we were all together playing at folk studio at Beat 72, and then there were also many jazz people coming from outside, like Sivilesi lived there. When Paul Blake came for a concert to the radio, I could play in jam with Mark Levinson and Barry Alsholt, which I met again. And so it was a very moved time. And my first approach to the full improvised music was with Mario Schiano, with the Gruppo Romano Free Jazz, which was set up in '65. And maybe I could try to make you listen something if all the tricks work now. Okay. Can you hear?
Yes, yes.
And see the group in '66?
Exactly.
Yeah. And this is Mario Schiano, myself, Franco Pecori, and Marcello Melis. Okay. This was recorded in a private house with a Revox G36. So it's a Valve tape recorder. Okay, so it was possible to combine many kind of groups, many jams, many like jams, but like attempt to make different groups. My interest in that period went towards also towards contemporary music. I was listening a lot of contemporary music and improvised, and that was the time mid '60s of the maybe collision between jazz and contemporary music. I think jazz arrived to be more informal with the experience not only of the Ornette Coleman, but just from Lenny Tristano and so many other, Russell. And so, the contemporary music was starting to have an interest, the direct interest in the improvisation. So there was a kind of melting, not so successful, I think, but just they were approached a lot. So my idea was to dedicate to, say, more to a more organized music. So I wanted to make composition and improvisation, but not as in jazz, as in traditional jazz. So there's a composition, then one makes it solo, and two makes their solo, or otherwise there is a collective improvisation. just to think that improvisation as a structural thing in the full composition. So for that, I tried to found a group, which was Nuove Forme Sonore, and the beginning in 1970, and the group in the beginning were a trio with myself, Bruno Tommaso on double bass, and Jesus Villarojo, who was was in Rome because he was studying with Petrassi with clarinet. And I can show you my first score. The first score I wrote for this group, and I can send also the recording, just of course for a few minutes. Okay, where is it? My God. Here's the score, and this is the music. It's for 3 performers. In this case, we are clarinet, trombone, and double bass. Here. The arrow means who leads in that section. Okay. Okay, too much music. That's and this was 71, the piece, and the 71 was exactly as exactly 50 years ago. We had the first performance of, as Francesca Scigliuzzo recalled me, because I didn't notice. We made our first concert in Rome. Then a lot of other things, but we are just dealing with the 60s and 70s, so I would stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Giancarlo. You was very fast, so we have some time for questions or comments before going to our music session. So if somebody from the public or has some observations, or I yesterday I remembered that the concert by Gruppo di Improvvisazione Nuova Consonanza was held on 20 March 1967 too. So it's 54, today is 54 years exactly. So it's really a incredible coincidence to be here all together.
It's a good month.
Yeah, yes. And so I was really interested in your score, because it needs some verbal explanation, I suppose, with the performers, because the score is precise enough, but it's graphic in some parts. So how did you handle this question? The mic?
I can show it rapidly now again if you want. Just giving.
How do you prefer? Okay.
No, just very quickly, very quickly. Nothing. Now, where is it? Okay. Condividi. Okay, this is there are some instructions which are not so many under this, but I can say more or less that the words in capital letter are to be said or sung. The symbols are generally, the musical symbols are generally traditional. This is percussion. This is low register. This is sung because it's white note are sung. This is breath only, and this is speaking very fastly. And the boxes, you do what you want using the material which is in the box. And then there are some instructions in between two or the three music. So the leads here, the number 2 leads and makes a pitch, and the number 1 has to make a dissonant with him, then becoming unison with him. Okay. And so this is Gesualdo da Venosa. You see the word from high to low. And this is a start a periodic phrases. It's written so.
Okay, so and the
at
tempo...
the end is not too complicated. It seems too complicated, but it's not too complicated, and leaves a good amount of freedom to performance.
Yeah, and there are portions with temporal dimension that is more precise, and the other, okay, within seconds, and other it's without temporal grid. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering because, yesterday we spoke about the transcribing improvised music, and I myself inspired my transcription to as I said yesterday, on graphic scores by Mario Bertoncini, on other graphic scores from this period. And so that could be maybe a useful example for the transcribing sound-based, I think, complex sound-based improvisation that actually has no precise pitch, but it's always something left aside, as here. Mm-hmm.
You mean just write for improvisation, improvise and then transcribe the improvisation?
Yeah, it is pretty interesting question
That's
of
a good challenge.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so if let me check. So if there is no other comments, maybe Giancarlo, we can leave you the floor for the first part of improvising section. So yeah, you are the leader of the first session.
Now, okay, I would like to see who is coming to play with us.
Yeah, here are Francesca and Michele.
Francesca and Michele.
Giulio is coming in also. So we need John is there and Evan is
somewhere.
Yeah, here we are. Okay, everybody's here.
No, that we were talking about this scheme last days, and maybe it's the simplest to start with, the one which gives a leader. Every player is sometimes a leader of the group. So the idea is that one musician is a leader and the other one playing with him, which then does mean they imitate him. They play something which musically could fit what the leader is going to do. The leader stops after a couple of minutes, then a little pause to be sure that it works. Then starts the second leader. The second leader starts, and the same stuff. So for each episode is led by one different musician. The fact which could be interesting that when one is a leader after that another one was leader before, he will try to play something different, and so maybe we could have a good variability of the situation, of the idioms. Okay, so, we can.
Yeah.
If we don't play too much, we can play all of us a couple of minutes each. What do you say? If you prefer, if you don't want, we have just to state the order.
Exactly.
Okay. Who wants to start?
So the musicians turn on the mics, and it's on you.
Okay. Okay. So, Evan, would you start to like? Okay, no, just I just try to make an order. So Evan, then Giulio, then John.
John, the mic.
John,
yeah, please turn on the mic. Okay.
Then Michele, myself, and Francesca. Is it clear?
And duration? Rough idea of each sequence?
No, in each sequence, the leader decides what to play.
Okay.
So you start and play what you want. Then Giulio make the same. Then Michele. Then John. No, then John. Then Michele. Then me. Then Francesca. Then we can make a great quarrel if we who is starting. Oh, that was my turn. No. Okay. Shall we go? Just a couple of minutes for each. Okay. Okay, gemacht. And there was some maybe misunderstanding in the order, but there's a main rule in improvised music that the first who makes a mistake is already right. So everything works.
Yeah. He's the leader of this.
Now, another piece. It's finished.
Yeah, thank you, Giancarlo. That was very a great experience. I would stress that something that is very obvious, but it's worthwhile to underline. It's the question is that we are improvising with the Zoom platform, so there are all kind of compression, filtering, and you are doing really very well in this virtual space. And I'm sure that our audience or all the participants could appreciate the quality of this this improvisation. So Giancarlo, would you suggest another
me again?
Yeah, or should we we can go with the Evan's idea and try to do something with your leadership?
Maybe not with everybody. So
yeah, exactly. I'm assuming that we're saving for the end the everybody together. So I take that for granted. And in order to produce some contrast, I suggest two shortish pieces now, one with me and Giulio, and one with me, Francesco and Bondesan. Francesca and Bondesan. So we start. Excuse me, I have to put my headphones on. Maybe this way around. You can't tell who I'm pointing at. I'm pointing at you. It's very crazy. You start to think, oh, because you're looking at the camera, you're looking at me. But it's not like that. Thank you, Giulio.
Thank you to you.
Amen. And now the second piece.
With both of us?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
I come to think of you as a fixed unit there, a duo.
Okay.
But if you want to break up into, would you rather be treated separately in this context? Or?
No, it's okay. You.
It's because you already sound like a group to me, so I want to play with your.
Okay.
I want to play with your group.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Evan Parker with strings.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's difficult to speak after something like this. So it's I am just like, okay, trying to don't disturb. And but okay, so if we want to take our schedule, now it's on John maybe to suggest.
Okay. So I would just like to talk about kind of this concept of time. Time is relative. I was thinking when I was a teenager, I studied boxing for a while. But in boxing, one round is 3 minutes. And it's one thing to talk to your girlfriend or your boyfriend for 3 minutes. The other thing is to be in the boxing ring. Am you getting feedback from me? No.
Oh, no, I don't think so. It's your feedback or there's some other
Okay.
icon.
Yeah. So anyway, my boxing career ended when I was maybe 2 minutes into the round, and this kid gave me a tremendous punch in the solar plexus. And I didn't fall down or anything, but the pain was so bad, and I just sort of got through the 3 minutes, and that ended my boxing career. I said, okay. But what I'm trying to say is that 3 minutes is precious, and 3 minutes is how do you know when you're improvising if you're not having a clock in front of you. And so that's one of the exercises that is, well, it's a good process. I think it's very important to record your improvisation, to be able to listen collectively back to them. For me, I feel music as a sort of sacred. There's a strong spiritual quality to it, and so the respect for sound, the listening, the silence, the spaces is very important. I think so. It's hard to leave your technique and not use it if you've studied hard and you've got you want to use it, you want to express it, but in the collective improvisation of at least the type that I've done, the emotional aspect is sort of frowned on in the sense that you have to leave your ego. When you go into the recording studio, you have to leave your ego at the door, and this is the same for when we're improvising, when you're improvising with other people, that you kind of lose this ego and listen to the collective. And it's through that, now there were some beautiful things that were happening in the last improvisation when I felt that there was really in some kind of understanding between you at certain points. So this is for me the interesting aspect of playing. I would say there's another thing we could do is we could try to do 3 minute. Although some of us have the clock on the Zoom, so I don't know if we can do. But anyway, we try to do 3 minutes, not thinking about looking at the clock. But the other parameter I would like to introduce is playing very softly. Okay, so how should we do this? Because why don't Giulio and Francesca begin, and each one of us will come in when they feel it's the right moment. Okay, we'll try to contain this thing into 3 minutes. Okay. Anyway, I think we're under the 3 minutes. I didn't even check it. Doesn't matter. Everyone can play. Now, let's try another parameter. We'll just play short notes, not necessarily fast, but just like staccato. Right? Okay.
Is any time direction? So 3 minutes again.
Yeah, let's try see if we can do it. I'll look at the time this time to see.
No, just if we have to think to have a limit.
No, we need the limit. But it's this idea of trying to.
Yeah, sure.
That's
really clear.
Giulio. Is Giulio gone or what? The other section. No?
Are you there, Giulio? Can you?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't see you. Okay. I thought you could raise your volume if it's possible.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so we're doing short notes, not necessarily only staccato, but short notes. the variation in dynamics is up to us. And just we try to think of this 3-minute thing. Okay, so now start.
We will start together.
We start. Yeah.
Okay, so.
Let's go. Yeah. Boom.
Okay. Very hard piece. Very difficult.
Yeah.
Because you're taken over by the impulse to just play. And then you start playing longer notes because, you know,
you're
not playing.
You're tired of those short notes. Yeah.
But I think this relates very much to that piece that they were talking about. Who was it? Valentina, was it? I think yesterday, talking about the Search and Reflect book of John Stevens. And there's a piece there called Click Piece. And it's just click, you know, he doesn't say short notes. He just says a click, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
So then maybe it becomes more obvious when you've made a mistake. Ha ha, you played a long note, you know.
Yeah. But this the beautiful thing is, I mean, it's very hard to do it in Zoom. It really is, because we don't sense our presence. I couldn't hear certain things, but you know, so we're approximating a kind of playing together. But it is much different if you're together visually. Sometimes it's a good thing to play in the dark because you just totally just use your ears to see what's going on, or to hear what's going on.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was there was one time in the improvisation group when we were doing various things, and Roland Kahn, who wasn't a percussionist, was playing. There's a series of glass bottles, and at a certain point, glass flew all over the place because he was hitting them too hard, and broke about 4 of them. So that was. Anyway.
But the idea about a really simple rule: only play short notes, and I found it impossible to obey. It made me.
We're all rebellious, I think.
But it made me think of a period in when the community of, let's say, people interested in new music was very small, and so sometimes we would end up playing these pieces of new music. So Cornelis Card used some of the structures of his, and this was a particular piece by Toshi Ichinagi for 3 sine wave generators. And there was only one rule: don't play a gliss. And I managed to break that about 4 times in 3 minutes.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Hopeless. The simpler the rule, the harder it is to follow.
Yeah. Anyway, rules are to be broken. Thank you. So I think that's.
Yeah, that's that it's we so the plan is the following. So we have time for finale, if as Evan suggested, with really free and
Let
together.
it rip.
Yeah, and then we have we have some supplementary times, and we can go a little bit further, and so we can have also some question after your final session. So yeah, I leave you the floor for the final improvisation, and that we will maybe take up some question from our audience.
So shall we specify a rough duration, or we just leave it completely open?
2 hours.
It's on you.
Thank you, Giancarlo. Your suggestions are always most helpful. So it's a 2-hour piece then.
Yeah.
Let's try for 10 minutes.
Yeah. We can have a look to the watch, or.
Yeah, we'll look at the watch this time.
Okay. Quanto detto 15 minuti davvero?
Sì, guardando l'orologio. Abbiamo il microfono acceso?
All together, no structure, and just jump in. Okay.
Freight slow.
Okay. Shall we talk a little bit about what each musician feels in situations?
Yeah, that would be great, John.
Might be just to hear from Francesca.
Of course, about this last improvisation.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I have to speak in the mic of the double bass.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Okay.
well, I felt I could feel a little bit better. Maybe it is, of course, difficult to improvise in a such huge group with distance on Zoom, of course. But when we have timbric combination, it's great. It's more difficult when we go to rhythmic or tonal or, by the way, harmonic stuff. I think it's a little bit more difficult. And
sometimes you feel exposed, right? You get into a tonal situation.
Yeah.
And everyone else is sort of.
And I think it also has something to do with distance, of course, because latency.
We're not. Yeah. Yeah, Francesca.
So sometimes I feel that the space is too full. Enough space for everyone. Maybe because we are trying to knowing each other, so we always add materials.
Yes.
And we never develop it at least for for enough time, maybe. And sometimes in this last improvisation, there were some moments where I can't understand where we try to go. Yeah.
Sure. Yes. Well, that happens. That happens. Julia.
Nothing special to add to, but I feel I can say confident maybe if I improvise in this way, if I don't see anything and just try to listen and try to answer to all the inputs that comes.
Yeah, without the visual.
Without visual component. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably good.
Can I add something?
Sure.
Yeah, and also the physical presence. It's not all about seeing each other, but it's also about connecting. And the most similar thing that happened, maybe it was before with Evan, when we two and Evan, that I felt that kind of connect. I don't know, mental, spiritual.
Sure, because you have the time to listen, and there's a different function of the strength against another instrument. like
yeah, and of
obviously,
course, yeah,
and that's an important thing, you know, it's to recognize when those. But yeah, it's difficult to improvise in six or you know more. It's something you have to really feel. Enough. There's a lot of garbage that comes out, and you have to learn to sort of throw that off, and then you get into something more deeper, you know. But this is a process. And it's supposed to be fun too, you know. So
Evan or Giancarlo?
Yeah, well, I think that, of course, the easiest situation for some people is to play solo. Then you're only responsible for the thing. The music is what you decide it is, and then the audience can make a judgment afterwards. But then maybe in order of numbers, 2 is easier than 3, 3 is easier than 4, 4 is easier than 5. It depends. If you're talking about a kind of what do they call these? There's groups of the same type of instrument and groups with mixed types of instrument. This is also very interesting, you know, that they present different challenges. If you have a saxophone quartet or a string quartet, it solves some problems, but it loses some possibilities. And when you get to 6, it's starting to get, as John said, you know, that's a large number of tracks. You're trying to track 5 other people who are trying to track you at the same time, and trying to make everybody feel part of the group and step back, step forward. You know, both things are an aspect of your responsibility to the group. Sometimes it needs you to step forward. Sometimes it may be as a consequence of some little gesture you've made before that moment. So there may be artificial ways of creating a space for yourself. All of these things take familiarity with the individual personalities. So this is where that notion, to be sorry to harp on again about idiomatic versus non-idiomatic, but I don't think we got to the point where I could convince Giancarlo Schiaffini that in the context of Derek Bailey's company and its evolution, there was a moment of transition from a kind of, let's call it lingua franca of improvised music. And there's a rupture at a certain point where if you invite Buckethead and I don't know, Anthony Braxton and help me, Veniero. I can't think of a specific combination, but the things became very strange towards the end of the life of company. And that generated something I think you could genuinely say, even if it didn't succeed, it was an attempt at creating non-idiomatic improvised music. And for me, that's something that happens when a group of strangers are required to play together. And it's something that you gradually evolve with goodwill. You evolve a group language. But that requires time and patience and goodwill from everyone and appetite. You know, there's no point in sticking around if you don't, everybody except you likes Chinese food. And they want to eat Chinese food tonight and tomorrow and the day after. It's always Chinese food. At a certain point, the one guy in the company that doesn't like Chinese food decides, maybe I'll eat somewhere else this evening. You know, that's all it is. It's an appetite thing. And you shouldn't be nervous about joining groups or leaving groups, especially when you start to establish. I'm talking like an old man, of course, because I am an old man. When you start to make relationships, they shouldn't be like marriages instantaneously. They should be judged like affairs, which either work out or don't work out. I've been very fortunate to work in some real constant relationships for a long time, and all I can say is that it suits my temperament to refine more and more the understanding between the people in the group. With trios, that's quite an interesting test, because the two groups that I'm thinking of are both trios. One is the Schlippenbach trio, which is with piano and drums, and the other is, you could call, it's a cooperative group actually, but it gets called My Trio, with Barry Guy and Paul Litton, bass and drums. So they present different challenges. Drummers are common to both, and in fact now the same drummer is common to both groups, because Lovens left the Schlippenbach trio about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and Alex decided to use Paul Litton. From all the range of drummers available to him, I think he felt that Paul could understand the job, what was required, and it's probably because he's been the second drummer in Globe Unity for a long time, so they've got used to playing and being together with one another on stage. Sorry, I go on. I do go on.
By the way, I posted the last incarnation of Company of 1991.
Okay, can you tell the personnel?
The personnel is Alexander Balanescu, violin, who at the time was playing with Aditi String Quartet. Vanessa Maskness on voice. Yves Robert on trombone. Derek, of course. Paul Lovens. Paul Rogers on bass. Pat Thomas on electronics. Buckethead on guitar. And finally, John Zorn, alto sax.
Okay.
This was very, very heterogeneous.
But I think there were more extreme versions. I'll do some research myself.
Okay, Giancarlo, would you say something now, or?
No, I think
okay.
It's not necessary to say more.
So let me read the first question and then to give the floor to. So the first question is from Francesco Fontanelli, and he asks just a question, probably obvious for you. How do you understand when it's time to finish the piece? Who will answer? Giancarlo?
Everybody escaping.
No,
okay.
It's hard not to be flippant with a question like that, but I would say, well, just before it ends, it's going to happen. It's going to end, that's it.
No, there is no universal method to stop or to understand what's happening. The fact is that every improviser has to listen a lot.
Yeah.
So he's going on listening more than playing, I would say. And so can get the situation in which appears that's maybe not everybody is convinced to finish, but somebody is saying that it's time to finish and is with a good authority, musical authority, or so just instant authority. And so it can happen. Sometimes it happens abrupt. And sometimes it happens fading out slowly, and this is the most easy way to do it. But there's not a rule. It's just listening. Just be, and that I would add just a little thing about the number of performances. I'm convinced too that 6 performances is the maximum to get to follow what's happening for each performer. Because the best thing, okay, Evan says one solo, okay, solo, but in 2 or 3 you can have more inputs and some suggestions, and so it's easy to converse in 2, 3, and in 6 we are at the border.
I didn't say solo was the best. I said it was the easiest.
Yeah.
Or simplest. Not necessarily the easiest, but certainly the simplest in formal terms.
For sure.
Then, of course, there is the Anthony Braxton solution to use the hourglass. I mean, just not to fix a short limit. I mean, if a collective improvisation should work for, say, the time space of a concert. So roughly, a concert can last 1 hour. So the hourglass is 1 hour. So when it's gone, it's gone. I mean, just you have to stop it anyway, because you have already accumulated 1 hour of collective playing. There's no. There's
Yes,
just
but you
can't
can
be a-
foresee what you are going to say to play. So when you know what happens, you can in view of what's going to happen. John?
Yeah, I think there's in this sense propositional kind of consciousness, the part of the player composer that begins to see a collective shape and where it's going, and so there's usually an awareness that that's enough. We've got to a point where it's a good point to, because the gesture maybe that you're using and you've musical gesture that you've gotten involved in uh, has come to kind of an end, you know. But all this is very relative.
Yeah, there was also Pietro Fabris who wanted to ask a question. Pietro, are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
Ciao, Michele. The question is this. I heard John Heinemann said, no, it was Ivan. He said, I couldn't obey the rule of short note. And my question is, would you be able as a group to break the time rule? So if it's supposed to last 10 minutes, would you be able as a group to stop after 3-4 minutes? Because probably I have the opposite problem, that sometimes I'm not patient enough. But it would be interesting if you as a group decide, no, why 10 minutes? 3 is enough. Just curiosity.
Well, I can speak up. I think the context determines the degree of discipline and the appropriateness of obeying orders. You know, if you're in some kind of hierarchical relationship where there's a boss and he's trying his hardest to bring the best out of people, and he specifies a time, it's very different than if in this rather loose situation we have a time definition. I'm sure everybody feels that they can stop and start whenever they want, and the time indicated was just a guide, a rough idea, and nothing to be not to follow a clock, but do your best. In the case of John's very interesting parallel with a boxing match, a 3-minute round, you know, it's if you think of the challenge of what you're doing, that's the problem. It's like a centipede thinking about how to walk, which leg to move. There's too much thought during the process of improvisation can be problematic about what you should be doing and what you're not doing. And if you're going to make some rules, then keep them very simple, I would say.
Well, if I must add something about the 3 minutes rule, we also have to bear in mind that for many, many years during the phonographic era, the 3 minutes limit was the classical limit of the record time. And when, and for example, jazz became so influenced by this implicit rule of the medium, that when the LP came first in the 10-inch format, which allowed at least 15 minutes per side, still for many years pieces were lasting 3 or 4 minutes even if they were in just the format could allow for more long durations. So that we had to wait for years and years before a jazz record could contain a longish improvisation, provided that it wasn't a live recording, of course.
I think also, really very rarely do you, if you're talking about a collective that improvises and everyone is sort of on their equal, there's no boss particularly. I think that it's very much, it would be very rare to say we're going to do 10 minutes or 12 minutes or three, you know. So you would allow the collective consciousness to say, to feel we're in the end of that section or that piece is, you know, this is, I think it's more of an intuitive and rather than, you know, you know, if you're doing schematics or that's a different story, but if it's freely, if it's intuitive and spontaneous improvisation, then you have to, I think like what you said, Pietro, you also have to say, oh, you know, we think we're going to do 10 minutes, 3 minutes and a half, because we've come to a good point. That's it. Anyway.
Good ending is very hard to not to accept, you know, and if it comes early, it's still a good ending. So on the subject of endings, I talk very often about endings should be played. They shouldn't be discovered by chance. And there's a kind of tendency to accept an ending which is not played. Nobody played it. It's just everybody stopped at the same time, but it wasn't an ending. That's interested me when you played the piece with Ivar, and he played the piano and played that piece, which had a clear ending. And it wasn't clear whether he wanted that to be the ending of the piece, but the cello player definitely did not want it to be the ending of the piece. And I agree with the cello player, because to accept that as an ending would have been very banal, I think. But the cello player had
me.
You were the cello player. Yeah. You made the right decision, man. You looked a little bit younger then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I have a younger son who his friends, when they see these photographs, think it's him.
Well, congratulations. That was, to me, you were the individual that understood the larger context. And if we finish like this, it's a cliche. Utterly cliched, very brave to do it, because he's counting on somebody else to put it in this new music context. But you were pretty much the only one that did that. So bravo for a concert of 53 years ago.
Yeah, so if we have to speak about endings, I think it's time to give the floor to Gianmario Borio.
We have to play.
Yeah. We have to play the end, exactly.
So you give me the most difficult task. Thank you so much. It was a great preparation for the workshop of next year. And I knew that the most eloquent part would be the performance. And this is it. And still it's going on. And I'm sure in the next day we will, all of us, we will think a lot about it, because there are so many questions: the ending, the density, the loud, the dynamics, so many things. And but I'm also very satisfied, because in this way, the experiment that we thought it's very dangerous, with improvising in different places, with different people, different generations, and with a technology which is very good. We always see the glass half full, but it is also half empty. This technology gives us the possibility to do something new and to continue a tradition in a completely different situation. But on the other, however, I can't wait what will happen. If this was already qualitatively very good, what it could happen will happen next year in presence. But I'm also very happy what we have done. I will look at it again on YouTube, because there is now an instrument for learning about this historical period, the styles and the problems of improvisation. There is a huge discussion everywhere about improvisation. And this intersection that we tried now between historical reconstruction, analytical and theoretical, and then playing, I don't know. I never saw it before. And I still think that we are doing something very original, which is in some way in the spirit of the early Darmstädter Ferienkurse für Neue Musik, where Rudolf Kolisch and Adorno and other and composers, they spoke together about pieces, and this is very important. It is also important that we don't, we keep contact, but I know we will do it. We keep contact, and I'm telling it also for our audience, if they would like to contact us and exchange some more ideas, because I see there are many branches of this discussion which are still on the air. And it will be, everything is good to prepare in the best way, the workshop, the real workshop of next year, which I strongly hope it will be again in March 2022. So I would like to express my thanks to everybody of you for the engagement and the input of the musicians, old and young, that collaborated, and also the memories and the considerations. And also this function that you have to bring us musicologists a little bit with our feet on the ground. There are many problems that we see in a rather abstract way, and you helped us a lot. And I hope also that in some way our theoretical thinking and also the historical data that we brought are also welcome for you. And I would like to express my thanks to the technical organization and coordination, Serena Concone and Tommaso Maggiolo. They gave us the background. They are not seen on screen, unfortunately, but if you are there, please, we would like to see you. Okay, anyway, they were the precondition. They put the precondition of everything what we have done. And okay, that's it. This is the end. Ingrid, I see.
Sorry, yeah, here I am. Okay, so and okay, yeah, that's it. So thank you very much to all the musicians.
This is the end, but
yeah, this is the end. So
see,
John,
I'm not very good with ending.
Veniero, thank you very much, and looking forward to see all in. And thank you for all the speakers. Yeah, and what to say. Have a nice year of research and a lot of music, improvised and not. And see you in Venice in a year.
Bye.
Thank you.
Grazie.